Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here, and as Venus is about to ingress Aquarius on January 3rd, it is time to get Aquarian, something I have no difficulty with given that Aquarius is my rising sign. However, for the rest of you who may not be at ease with those energies, get your spacesuit on because it's going to be a cosmic ride. Now, when exploring the transit of a planet from one sign to the next, I always like to see it in terms of the larger cycle. You know, every sign in the zodiac has its own purpose. They're all depicting a larger progression of the human experience, a sort of developmental pathway through the sky. So every sign has its own specific purpose and function in terms of the specific attributes and lessons and species of wisdom that it is encouraging us to develop. But, you know, there's a reason we have 12 signs and not just one. If we stick too rigidly just to the lessons and the wisdoms of one sign just because we've got comfortable there, then we start to atrophy, we start to become jaded, we become set in our ways, we cease growing. So the sign that succeeds another sign is always meant to correct the imbalances and the excesses and the negative qualities of that sign, to offer some kind of regeneration or refreshed approach that is vital for our continued progress as human beings. So, for instance, when Venus is in Capricorn, we become very savvy, we become long-headed, we have the ability to make goals and long-term aspirations, and we have that capacity to be more ascetic, to put aside current pleasures, to defer gratification to a future horizon, so that we can experience a greater gratification. You know, rather than just indulging everything at once, we say, I'm going to pool my resources and build up my strengths and my abilities and expand my power base so that I can build sources of pleasure and wealth and prosperity that will be more longer lasting. But the problem is that eventually we become so focused on that far off distant future, that far off distant goal, that we cease to appreciate the present, and we can become quite cold and misanthropic. But also there's a very different way in which both Capricorn and Aquarius view the future. Both of them are concerned with the future, with what's going ahead, and being winter signs, that makes sense, you know. Both of them are going to be looking forward to that spring, to that moment of regeneration where things really start warming up and moving again. But one of the less welcome effects of Venus in Capricorn and Capricornian transits in general is that they start seeing the future solely as a negative thing. You know, they're usually very attached to the past, and the future is this destructive, apocalyptic thing, this future disaster, this future upheaval, which is going to threaten to take away everything that you've loved and worked for, and therefore you need to hoard your resources as much as possible so that you know that you'll be okay when the worst comes. You'll know you'll have everything you need to meet that impending crisis. And when the future is always seen in a negative light, then it can make us become resistant to any kind of change or openness or vulnerability as a consequence. You know, Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, which has those solid boundaries. It always feels the need to protect itself from the dangers and hazards of life, which is a perfectly logical response when you're in the depths of winter. But as that winter gradually begins to thaw and things begins to warm up again, and there is that gradual reemergence of life with snowdrops outside, robins singing, and crocuses piercing up through the lawn, there has to be a change in spirit for things to go along with. And that's where the energies of Aquarius come in. That Aquarius looks to the future, but in a more hopeful and optimistic light. And part of this is by rather than resisting change, embracing the revolutionary spirit of change as a positive force for the betterment of the world. You know, Capricorn can be very conservative. It likes its ironclad institutions. It likes doing the things it's always done because that creates a stable world that it knows how to navigate, whereas new things have their own rules and can also cause entrenched power structures to slip away. But Aquarius, being an air sign, tries to view these developments with a greater feeling of equanimity and dispassion. So rather than holding on to things for dear life, instead it takes a stark look at the world and our lives as it is, and it says, actually, these things are corrupt, these things are worn out, these things are no longer serving their purpose and are just kept around as vestigial relics and tradition, but they're actually holding back the march of progress. So Aquarius and Venus in Aquarius wants to be a vehicle for change, for opening up the future to new possibilities, which will increase the livelihoods, improve the livelihoods of everyone by ushering in an age of greater equality, greater solidarity, greater democracy, and offering more opportunities to more people, in theory anyway. That's the aspiration, that's the ideal. The reality may be a very different matter altogether. This is why we associate Aquarius with the star card in the tarot. Because like I said, when we're in that Capricornian midwinter, we are focused on just enduring, just getting through those very harsh, cruel times where things seem cold and where human warmth and love and compassion doesn't seem very forthcoming. You know, we're just trying to get from day to day. I know I often have been during that period. Whereas once we have those Aquarius transits, we start to move beyond that. We start to let go of some of those rigid protective barriers, and start to dream again, and start to be visionary again, and look to the future and say, the future doesn't have to be terrifying. The future could also be something that brings my dreams to me, that offers me enlightenment, that can give me hopes and joys and experiences of fulfillment and different sides of pleasure that I've never experienced before. So there's an experimental quality to Venus in Aquarius, you know, rather than just sticking with what it knows, with having these ironclad likes and dislikes, these tastes that have been fortified into monolithic rules and entrenched systems. And instead it says, you know what, actually, I am more than who I think I am. That there are whole worlds of beauty and pleasure out there that I know nothing about. And maybe now is the time to start tasting them, to start experiencing them. And not all of that is necessarily always acted out. Some of it's maybe just playing with those ideas in your head, playing with different things and thinking about, does that feel right for me? Is that something that I want to explore? Maybe, maybe not. But it's all about just opening one's heart to the possibility of discovering new corners of yourself, which rather than being filled with monsters are instead filled with glittering, scintillating stars. One of the ironies, though, of Venus in Aquarius, which is generally considered to be one of its weaker transits, is that while it has very idealistic notions of human relationships and the nature of love as this thing that binds whole groups of us together, it finds the actual experience of love difficult. You know, when we speak about love in this grand utopian way as this civilizing influence of this thing that brings us all together in fraternal bonds of partnership and those larger groups, you know, all coming together with this shared aim for the betterment of all, it all starts to look a bit like a communist poster, you know, for the idealized version of Soviet Russia, as opposed to the hideousness of the, you know, the brutalist architecture and the corrupt regime. So the problem with these idealized notions of brotherhood and love is that emotion kind of gets taken out of the picture, and it is an air sign after all. It's comfortable with intellectual feeling as opposed to experienced feeling. If we talk about love in this grand philosophical way, it keeps us up here. It keeps us up in the clouds where we have this grander vision of life, whereas the actual experience of love and caring for someone else, as I'm sure most of you know, is confusing, is painful, is bewildering, is watery, is muddy, can lead us in all these different crazy directions to the point of where much of the time we have no clarity about anything and are more bewildered than ever. And so I often find that when I meet people who have Venus in Aquarius natally, they often struggle with romantic relationships, because they're always imagining this perfect, idealized connection with another person, but which actually, their image of it is so perfect that no human being could ever possibly reach that lofty height. They would have to be a Messiah, they would have to be a Buddha, they would have to be a Jesus Christ, this perfectly enlightened being, and even then they would probably still find faults with them. So they are rather perfectionists when it comes to matters of the heart. Like I said, I know some Venus in Aquarius people, and just almost any display of normal humanity is a red flag for them. Just accepting all the squalid, dirty, petty parts of the human experience is really hard for them, because they're always trying to imagine this godlike man. They're trying to imagine man and woman not as they are, but who they could be. And it always creates that tension between the ideal and the real, which is a bit of a mess, to be honest. But because of this Venus in Aquarius, rather than getting stuck in accepted modes of relating to people, is open to exploring more experimental approaches to relationships. So when I think about Venus in Aquarius, I also think about polyamory, where people can have multiple partners, where they're not necessarily tied to these nuclear expectations, to that relationship escalator of meet a nice partner, settle down, get a house, get kids, get pets, die. I think what Venus in Aquarius really wants is to find a relationship that gives us space to breathe, where we can commit to someone and yet still be true to ourselves, because relationships require so much compromise. And Aquarius doesn't really want to compromise. It wants to be true to its spirit, to its individuality, no matter what, which isn't really in keeping with Venus's ethos of sharing and caring and relating and finding that midpoint between two opposing desires. So yeah, it's a weird conflict to navigate, and definitely if any relationships have been feeling stale or stagnant, or we've just been feeling too closed off from other people during that midwinter period, then Venus in Aquarius can offer us that feeling of regeneration, that willingness to actually look at other people and think, oh, maybe that could work, maybe I could try that, maybe I could try dating again, maybe I could try dating someone I'd never thought I would have dated before. Maybe I could open up to a relationship structure which I'd never become before. But even outside of that, also maybe I could join some new group which expresses my progressive political values. I could go out and meet new people. I could go out and see a band I never thought I would see. It's all about trying the novel, about having the vulnerability to expose yourself, which could provoke you to greater awareness and wisdom, precisely because it is not something you have previously experienced. There are some other interesting contradictions to Venus in Aquarius, which are also worth talking about, I feel. So Venus in Aquarius, like most Aquarius placements, often has the feeling of being alien, even though it's so interested in humanity and the betterment of humanity, it often feels outside of the rest of the human race in some way. It feels alien. It's almost like a visitor, an anthropologist from another planet who's landed here and is kind of looking at people and going, oh, why do they do that? That's very strange. Couldn't they do it this way? That would make more sense. Oh, that's a very interesting cultural phenomenon. Let me explore it through my scientific lens and anthropomorphic telescope. And this has an interesting effect that generally Venus in Aquarius will value some odd things, some things that might seem eccentric to other people. And because it has that outsider's alien perspective and is always asking questions about things that other people can take for granted, it means it can often make connections, creative connections and juxtapositions that most people wouldn't make. It can see these hidden correlations which to other people are just hiding in plain sight, but which to them, really leap out in this very imaginative and sometimes transgressive way. But because of its ability to see those odd connections which other people's perception omits, it also often misses the obvious. And some just very basic ways of human relating can be very confusing to Venus in Aquarius. Like I said, it can understand the ideological nature of love. It could even write books about love. But when it sees other partners together, other, normal people relating to each other in a normal way, it might look at them and think, what the fuck are they doing? I don't understand why people are doing that. Why are they acting so strangely and romantically and irrational? There's a bit of a cerebral ick about these things, and this is partly because Aquarius is ruled by two very different planets. It's ruled by Uranus, the god of the sky, who's always trying to see these utopian systems, but also ruled by Saturn, which is colder and more traditional and structured and judgmental. And so there's this friction there that Venus in Aquarius has this image of itself as this liberated philanthropist who likes people and is always there to help people whatever they need. But often in a genuine, real one-to-one situation, they can be very judgmental, like many of the fixed signs can. Because Aquarius has such strong principles, it might be very kind and compassionate to someone up to a point, but if they break some obscure principle that they hold, in this ironclad tablet in their mind, then they will judge that person with absolute cutthroat severity and show them very little compassion there at all. So there is that weird juxtaposition between this one side that is very gentle, very philanthropic and willing to help anyone in any situation, and then this other part which is cold and judgmental and actually far less reasonable than it likes to think of itself as being. It's a very weird juxtaposition. Even though Venus is still conjunct Pluto for the time being, and I've made 3 videos about that conjunction, exploring it from different angles, so watch those if you want to know more. I won't repeat myself here. There are some harmonious aspects also occurring with Venus at the moment. There is a sextile with Jupiter and a trine with Mars. I think if you've been feeling a bit guarded and stoic and worn down, then these positive aspects to Jupiter and Mars can both be very energizing and very empowering. Both of these planets in connection to Venus can make us believe more in ourselves, but also to place more value on our own personal values, to place value on what we want from life, to place value on our desire just to make life beautiful and pleasurable, because so often I think it's easy to downplay that, especially during the Capricornian transit. We can see our pleasures as inconveniences that are getting in the way of the hard work that we need to do to achieve in the world. So both of those things can make us feel more exploratory, more willing to come together with others to have fun, more prone to pursue our desires when they arise. That definitely goes hand in hand with an increase in libido and increased spending as well, which normally during such a harmonious transit wouldn't be a bad thing, having a bit of a shopping fest and going out and buying things that will genuinely make you happy or which are invested in some of your future ideas and commitments is a good thing. But because Mercury is still retrograde for the time being, I would still caution against against splurging too much or making any really big or important purchases unless they're absolutely necessary. For instance, I am thinking about getting a proper film camera so that I can improve the quality of the videos I will make in this channel in the future. However, I am definitely waiting until Mercury has gone direct again before I buy anything like that, because Mercury does have a tendency to, when it's retrograde, to mess up our technology. Anyway, that's enough for me now. This video is the longest one so far, but I was enjoying myself and I hope you will too. If you have, please like, subscribe and share the content, and please send me any requests if you have ideas for future videos I could make. Bye!